Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Business of Boutique Fitness podcast. I'm your host today, Caroline, team captain here at the Grow Your Studio Profitably program, also a studio owner myself. And today I'm excited to pose a question to you. Now, I want you to think about, is your social life your studio? If your studio has become your only community, your creative outlet, your only source of validation, and your workplace, this episode is for you. You built your studio to serve others, but somewhere along the way, it started to consume you. You are not your business, and your business is healthier when you are too. So let's start with the signs. What are the signs that that boundary has been crossed, that your social life is your studio and vice versa? Well, number one, you spend all of your time at your studio, even when you're not on the schedule. And yes, to some extent, in terms of business ownership, we spend a lot of time in our businesses, but we're all also striving for that healthy work-life balance, right? Now, here's another thing to look at. Are your team members and your studio members your only friends? Again, we want that community that fits us. Our client avatar should be somewhat close to those people that we feel drawn to. It's the community we cultivate. But again, there should be some distinction. Now think about this. Does your mood rise and fall with client feedback, class attendance, or team drama? Do you feel lonely when you're not at the studio, but also exhausted when you're here? Man, that's a major sign of burnout. And you can't imagine what a vacation or a weekend away would even look like. So maybe you recognized yourself in a few of those points. And now let's talk about why this happens. Well, as I touched on earlier, studio owners often build their passions or their business out of their passion. I think we sit in a unique industry where not many of us go into opening a boutique fitness studio because we love the business. We want to be the high-powered CEO, and sure, there are a few of us. Or maybe you discover that in yourself throughout your ownership journey, but many of us, I think of myself in this, find and start a studio because we love the modality. Man, I found yoga and it changed my life, or strength training, or cycle, or whatever it is. I did a training and I want to share it with people. And that led to us opening these studios. So, it starts as community building, but it morphs into emotional outsourcing, which can really take its toll in the long term, not only on your emotional health, but on the health of your business. You might be praised for being all in our hustle culture of I am working all day, all night, but know that that comes at a cost. Again, it's for you and for the business. When your business becomes your identity, any hiccup can feel like a personal failure. And man, as a coach, I really want to distance yourself from that mindset. So what is the cost of no separation in your business? Number one, and I touched on it a second ago, is burnout. That emotional exhaustion marked as being needed is so tough to overcome. You might also start to find that boundary erosion with staff and clients, and maybe you're extending yourself far too much, or you're feeling kind of taken advantage of by your staff. This inability to lead objectively, where you're too close to everything to make real strategic decisions. Then, in business, we really do need to be able to look at the numbers and make decisions driven out of the data. And if I'm so close to all of the members and all of the people, it can be really, really tricky to come to those strategic decisions. You might also be feeling that resentment when people leave, push back, or change the vibe of the studio. And maybe you find that the world gets small even when your studio gets big. So we think about and we talk about mindset so much on this podcast and in our work at Studio Grow. So let's talk through some healthy reframes for you as a studio owner if you identify with even just one of these points that I've mentioned above. Now, remember this, your studio is your work home, not your whole world. And that might be an insane concept for you to even grasp. So many of us pour our everything into getting our studio started. But I also know from working with many owners that bringing time back, getting energy back, having that work-life balance is such a goal for so many of you. Now, when we start to edge toward that spot where we could maybe take a step back, that's where things get scary. We have to redefine our role in the studio. We have to really trust the people who are working for us and understand that they might not do things the way that I do things. Something I always keep in my head is they might only do things 80% of the way that I would do it, but man, if I can get an hour, 2 hours of time back, maybe even a whole day off a week, that is worth it. Your members and your team deserve a leader who's inspired and grounded, not emotionally depleted. I always think of this in the concept of teaching a class. I've taught so many yoga classes, and if I teach endlessly without any break or without any continuing education, I often find myself burnt out. And I might be looking to sequence a class for my packed noon time slot, and I just can't think of absolutely anything that feels inspiring to teach, and it starts to lose its spark. Business ownership is the same way. Take a break from the business. Maybe read a business book. Maybe invest in some professional education and development for yourself. And with that little break and reignited spark, you might find that you come back to your studio mitigating that burnout and so excited to dive into the real work. Maybe refreshing your mindset on what scaling and growing your business could look like. And now know that belonging starts with you. Building a life outside of the studio allows you to show up better inside it. And again, that's such a tough topic for so many of us to grasp because our everything is tied to these studios. But the more you prioritize your self-care outside of the studio, the more that you can pour back into your studio. So, if any of this is hitting a nerve with you, these thought reframes, these points, these pieces of burnout, here's what I want you to do. Number one, audit your energy. Ask, where does my energy come from right now? And where does it go? Make a list of non-studio activities that refill you. And then ask yourself, are these happening? Something I find so interesting about this industry is so many of us are dealing with really emotional and deeply rooted issues and things tied to movement with our clients. We are really good at telling our clients to prioritize self-care and spend an hour for yourself on the mat. Come hit the cycle class, check out from email and text messages and people. But we often don't do the same to ourselves. So I want you to think of these non-studio activities that refill you and ask, are you doing them? Second, start to build some non-studio boundaries. Pick one non-studio hour each day. Just 1 hour. And maybe this is where you walk, you work out, you take a class in your own modality. Can you imagine taking an actual yoga class? Maybe it's just a quiet coffee. Now, we talk so much in our coaching about implementation blocks, right? I tell my clients at a minimum, I want you to set aside 2 hours a week where you are working on the business, not in the business. And this is sacred time. This probably means leaving your studio. This probably means finding that corner, that nook where no one can disturb you and you can get the deep work done. And that's important work. And I want you to reflect and implement this 1 hour non-negotiable sacred time block for you into your day as well. I think that 1 hour can be life-changing. I also want you to have one friend or family member conversation each week that's not about the business. And again, believe me, I get it. When you're in the throes of growing a studio or turning a studio around, even if it's really exciting and invigorating to you in the moment, you need to find time to talk about things that aren't work, that aren't the studio, that aren't insert your modality here. Even if it's exciting in the moment, sometimes it'll spiral into that burnout. And that's when it starts to become a little bit less fun. Now, I want you to also try not being the host or the leader in every environment you enter. And also, I speak from experience, it's tough. We spend so much time in the early stages of our studio building up our leadership. Maybe it wasn't something that came naturally to you, but with a lot of work and effort, building the perfect team in this community that really survives and thrives with you, it can be tough to step out of that role. But I urge you to try just once a week. Be in the background. Be not the leader of your studio. Just enjoy that others might be taking the wheel here. It's a crazy concept, but it can really recharge you. And I also want you to think and reconnect with your identity outside of the studio. What were you passionate about before this business? Sometimes I will sit down and I'll talk to my husband and say, hey, remember when I just did yoga in our basement like once a week and it wasn't our entire life and everything that we had built things around? It feels crazy at this point in the game that at one point this business was just a hobby. And so what I like to do in that moment is do a yoga class. And sometimes it's just in my bedroom, just putting a mat up on the floor, but reconnecting back to the why I liked this before I turned it into a business. And I want you to start to urge and spiral to think through other activities that you used to do that maybe you don't have time for anymore. Was it taking an art class, exploring a new restaurant, venturing out to a new coffee shop and just people watching, maybe just walking aimlessly around? Those are all great things to refill your cup. What do you miss doing for no reason other than joy? I think in business ownership, especially in the seat where we're trying to grow and scale our businesses, we often push aside things that bring us joy because everything I do has to have a return or an impact or something measurable and strong. Now, what if I told you to think of just one activity that brings you joy? Again, it could be sitting at a cafe and people watching, or taking that yoga class without auditing the teacher's every single cue and thinking of the feedback you're going to give. Maybe it's reading a book, and maybe it's reading a book that's not a book about business or self-development. It's just a book that you enjoy. Think about those things and try to implement them back into your life. I also want you to give yourself permission to reintroduce yourself to yourself. It's normal and healthy for us to evolve over time. And, I can certainly say that as my business ownership journey has evolved, my sense of self has evolved too. And sometimes it's helpful to just think of, who am I right now? Maybe it's very different than the last time I checked in. And, I'll try not to implement too much strategy here, but I like to think about this in similar to reinventing our client avatar. Over time, that changes, and we have to redefine who it is who uses our studio. And so from the most, personal joy seated place, I want you to reintroduce and really think through who you are in this moment and what pieces of joy you need to keep yourself strong in the workplace. Now, I want you to remember this. You built a space for people to feel seen and connected. You deserve that too, and not just inside of your business. So I hope as you listen to this episode, if you identified with any of the pieces I brought up, you'll be able to take action. Find that joy, find those activities that make you tick outside of your studio, knowing that sometimes it's that break that allows you to come back into the studio more recharged, less burnt out than you could have ever imagined. Thanks again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we'll catch you on the next one.